So I'm just going to go ahead and do 3 examples that we've been completing in the classroom for the past 2 weeks. This may help you just slow things down a little bit and take the time to review the concepts. So first question is, a portable music player with 4 gigabytes of memory stores about 1,000 songs. A music player with 60 gigabytes of memory stores about 15,000 songs. Is the number of songs proportional to the amount of memory? Explain your reasoning. So we've been dealing with comparing 2 things while we've been in class. And in this case, we're comparing 4 gigabytes and we're comparing the amount of songs. So we want you guys to use words before you set up your proportion. So 4 gigabytes is the amount of space. So maybe what I'll do is just put amount of space over here. And I'm going to make my ratio using the colon. And the 1,000 songs represents the number of songs. Okay, so actually I'm going to write number of songs. So we have to use words when setting this up. We also know that when we do this, we don't always have to use this format. We can change the format. Instead of using the colon, we can use a fraction. So if I rewrite this as a fraction, I'm going to get, the amount of space over the number of songs. So both are proportions. However, one of them is in fraction form, which we've been using in the classroom. So we know that there are 4 gigabytes for 1,000 songs. Well, 4 gigabytes is the amount of space. So I'm just going to put an equal sign here, and I'm going to make sure that the 4 gigabytes goes where the amount of space is. Okay, so 4 gigabytes needs to go at the top because that's what we have for the numerator, the top. We have 1,000 songs for 4 gigabytes of memory. So 1,000 needs to go where it says number of songs. All of this needs to be equal to the next pieces of information. So here they're talking about how it's 60 gigabytes. So when you see the word 60 gigabytes, you have to think, well, does that represent the amount of space or does that represent the number of songs? And you should know that gigabytes represents the amount of space, which means 60 needs to go at the top, since the amount of space is written at the top in our fraction set up in words. And then it tells us that 60 gigabytes stores 15,000 songs. So 15,000, that number, needs to go where the number of songs are. We'll go ahead and place 15,000 where it says number of songs. So now we have a proportion set up. We now have something that looks like a proportion. This is the only part that we'll really be using though. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just rewrite this on the right side so that the work is neatly organized and that I can work from here. So from here, what you're going to do is ask yourself, well, what's the question? Because I have a full proportion here. It asks if the number of songs is it proportional to the amount of memory. So we're looking at this proportion and we need to see if it is proportional. So we take a look. You can do this 2 ways. You can do it with multiplication or you can do it with division. So you can say, well, 4 times what gives me 60? So you can figure that out, and 4 times 12, nope, not 4 times 12, sorry. 4 times 15 gives me 60. And the reason I know that, because that's not an easy multiplication to remember, and if you struggle with multiplications, this could be a problem. So the way that I know this is I took 60 and I actually divided it by 4. And 60 divided by 4 is 15. So I can choose to go from left to right and multiply, because from 4 to 60, that makes the number bigger, so that's why we multiply. And let's check to see if that works for the bottom. So does 1,000 times 15 equal 15,000? So we can check that. So we just do 1,000 times 15, and it does indeed give you 15,000. So that's one way of doing it. Again, you could do it with divisions. So if you're going the other direction, what you can do here is do 60 divided by what will give you 4? Well, 60 divided by 15 will give you 4. And going from a bigger number to a smaller number means that we divide. So you have to look at the direction of the arrow. So if we try the same thing and we start at 15,000, if we try to divide by 15 again, it does indeed give you 1,000. Okay, so that's one way of doing this, and you would just answer that yes, the number of songs is proportional to the amount of memory, and the explain your reasoning is right here. You're showing your work, you're dividing by 15, and that shows that the proportions are equal. Therefore, that's a little therefore symbol. Yes, these are proportional. So moving on to the next one. A gear ratio is the ratio of the numbers of teeth in two connected gears. The gear ratio of two gears is 3 to 2. Now they don't explain what the 3 represents, what the 2 represents. We know that they're both gears, but we don't really know what they represent. So now we move on to the next part of the question. The larger gear has 126 teeth. How many teeth does the smaller gear have? So we know that we're comparing larger gears, and we know that we're comparing the smaller gears. So we're going to put that in words before we start anything at all. So I'm going to put smaller gear, and I'll set it up with a colon to larger gear. Now be careful here. The first number in this ratio is 3, and the second number is 2. But since they don't tell us what those represent, you have to kind of figure it out. Now, because we're talking about a smaller gear and a larger gear, you can relate this back to a smaller number and a larger number. So that means that the 2 needs to go on this side and the 3 needs to go on this side. From here, you can then put where the 126 goes. Well, the 126 teeth represents the larger gear. So you don't want to put it on the left side because the left side represents smaller gear. So we're going to go ahead and put 126 where the larger gear is. And smaller gear, I'm just going to put an S for smaller because we don't know what it is. It asks us, how many teeth does the smaller gear have? So here's the proportion set up, but we've been telling you, take your proportion that you've set up and put it in a different form. And the form that we've been working on has been fraction form. So I'm going to rewrite this as 2 over 3 equals S over 126. You have to have words somewhere in your proportion, and I have that written right at the top. So now that I'm looking for S, that's what I'm looking for. How many teeth does a smaller gear have? Well, there's something in the way on this side, and the division by 126 is totally in the way. So to cancel out a division, we need to multiply not just one side, but multiply both sides by 126. And you need to show that work. So once we get to this point, we can cancel out the 126's, and the reason we can do that is because 126 divided by 126 is 1. And we have an S left over right here. But on the left side, it's not that easy. You actually have to do this multiplication. So when we do that on the calculator, 2 times 126 equals 252. So you can write that down. Don't forget about the division by 3. Okay? So if I do that, 252 divided by 3 is equal to 84. So I put the 84 over here. And now in math, whenever you see a 1 in front of a letter, you don't need to write it. So this is just equal to S. So you have to have S equals 84, which means we can answer the question, and how many teeth does the smaller gear have? The smaller gear has 84 teeth. That's my concluding sentence, and that's what we're looking for. So based on the success criteria that we did in class, we need to make sure we have a couple things here. We have the words written in the proportion, we have the proportion set up, we have the work shown right over here, we have the solution, which is very, very clear, and then we have a concluding sentence. So make sure that all those things are very clear and organized on your worksheet. So moving to the last question, we have unit rates, which we've done in class as well. And again, we need to set up a proportion, but when we're talking about a unit rate, we're talking about one item, okay? That number or the word unit represents 1. So let's set this up. We have $2.37 for 3 kilograms of apple. Well, when we have money like this, that's a cost. So we need to pay something. So you could put a little $sign there if it helps you. I'll use the colon. Kilograms represents amount of apples, okay? So you don't have to use these exact words, but something very similar. Price could be a different word for cost. Maybe amount of apples you can use instead of just amount. That's really up to you, but you need to use words at this point so that you know that the $2.37 goes on the left side and the amount goes on the right side. So now that we have this set up, we need to determine the unit rate. So what we want is the cost for 1 apple because it's a unit rate. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for the cost for 1 apple. So if we're looking for the cost, I'm going to use C as a letter because we don't know what the cost will be. And the amount of apples will be 1 apple. So if you set this up in a fraction form, you're going to get 2.37 over 3 equals C over 1. There are 2 ways to really write this proportion. I did it from left to right, but you can also do 237 over C equals 3 over 1. So there's 2 ways of doing it, but we've been using this method right over here, so I think we're just going to go ahead and solve it with that. So now that we have our proportion set up, we can go ahead and solve for C, and we say, well, what's going on around the C? There's a division by 1, which is in the way. How do we cancel out a division by 1? We multiply by 1 on both sides. $2.37 times 1 is $2.37. We're going to go ahead and divide that by 3 in a second. Over here, 1 divided by 1 is 1. And then we have a C left over because we are looking for the cost. If I go ahead and calculate $2.37 divided by 3, I get 79 cents for 1 apple. And that's what I'm looking for. So in your concluding sentence, you have to say the unit rate is, don't forget the $sign, 79 cents for 1 apple. That's what I'm looking for.